Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to AlMaghrib's YouTube channel. Faith While Black is the series. Make sure that you turn on your notifications and subscribe so that you don't miss an episode.
Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam kathira. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu salatu rabbi salamu alayhi. Welcome back. We got another episode of Faith While Black, and here I have with me Fatima Abdul Wahab. Assalamu alaikum, Fatima.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing?
I'm great, alhamdulillah. I'm doing great.
Alhamdulillah. How is life in quarantine?
It is great, alhamdulillah.
All right, so tell, for those of you who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Fatima. As we've said, I am 23 years old. I am a graduate student. I'm actually double degreeing, so I'm getting my pharmacy degree. I'm gonna become a pharmacist, inshallah, 2021, and I'm also getting my MBA. So I'm gonna get my MBA 2020 this year, inshallah. I am I'm originally from Nigeria. I'm Nigerian. My parents are Nigerian, and I was raised in Houston, Texas. I have lived in Houston all my life, well, majority of my life, and that's it.
Okay, so number one, we've established that you're an overachiever, mashallah, or that you're Nigerian, one of the two, which is pretty much. Number two is you are not just going to be a pharmacist, inshallah, but you're going to own the pharmacy. Is that the plan? And number three, Houston, Texas. So Houston is Houston the biggest Nigerian population in the US?
I don't know, but we do have a huge Nigerian population in Houston. As compared to other states, I don't know about every single Nigerian community everywhere, but I know we do have one of the biggest chapters of 𝐁𝐥𝐚𝐜𝐤, the Nigerian Council of something. But
so what other cities do they talk about when they talk about a lot of Nigerians?
There's a lot on the East Coast, so like New York and New Jersey also has a lot of Nigerians also.
Okay. I mean, as a non-Nigerian, I've just never heard of any place being anywhere close to Houston when you talk about Nigerians. You got the Masajid, you've got 𝐁𝐥𝐻 Olajuwon, you got the restaurant. It's a big
That's true. Actually, I think Houston does have the largest population because Houston is like in the south, and the weather. A lot of people prefer the weather because it's closer to the weather in Nigeria. So I can agree that Houston does have one of the largest populations of Nigerians.
Okay, and so you grew up in Houston, you never lived anywhere else. Tell us, so this series is, we're kind of just navigating and exploring people's experiences, particularly being Black. You are obviously a young Black woman, Muslim. You have very, very, pronounced experiences, and I've noticed as well that you have. Is this a particular podcast that you started, or?
It's not a podcast, but it was more. It's just a live series, and I got the idea from just seeing people just being really silent and like not really talking. Right now, we're not even actually talking about Black lives. We're talking about marriage, but on Thursday, we're going to start talking about the whole Black Lives Matter issue. It's going to be like in stages. So we're going to talk, because we're going from marriage to Black lives, right? We're going to start talking about being married or how to get married as a Black woman, right? So we're going to phase into that. But for me, it started more, what motivated me to start that was because I realized a lot of, not just non-Black people were silent. It just kind of hurt me more that a lot of my Muslim friends were actually silent on this Black Lives Matter issue. And then later on, I came to find out that a lot of people didn't want to be silent, but then they heard that protesting and standing up for these things were actually haram. And they had sheikhs actually tell them that. So I was like, that's kind of funny, because a couple months ago, we were kind of protesting Kashmir. right? And we're protesting all these things. And I'm from Houston. We've been doing Free Palestine protests since I was 5. I've been there with my dad in downtown, in Discovery Green, since I was 5 years old, protesting Free Palestine, and may Allah obviously grant them ease, and may Allah remove them from the suffering that they're going through, not comparing anyone's struggles. But I just feel like it's very unfair for there to be people out there who are saying these things. So that's what kind of like, I felt like I needed to stand up, because a lot of people were silent, and this is what made me stand up personally.
So the issue of protests being haram, it's a very known position, and it's been, I mean, that's the position that I've heard all my life. I didn't have necessarily a problem with people who are consistent, people who just believe protests are haram and so they didn't go. I can respect that. I did notice the hesitancy that you're alluding to, which is that when it comes to all of these other places all over the world, we necessarily, I mean, people weren't even asking what the plan is or what the program is or it's okay. It's something that people were gonna go and participate in just for the purpose of supporting and kind of showing solidarity and these types of things. But then when it came to, the protests that have been happening over the past couple of weeks, it was, there was a lot more questions that were being asked, like what's the end game, and what's the objective, and what's the plan? It's like, okay, well, there was no plan for any of the other protests that we knew of. At least if there was a plan, it was happening at 10,000 miles away. We have no idea what the plan is, and we didn't require. And so that hesitancy was very telling. But a question that I have is, you said that it hurt you very much. Why did it hurt you?
It hurt me because I've always been personally, and in my family in general, like we've always made it a point, and I'm not saying we're doing it for the sake of Allah. I'm not trying to we're not doing it for the sake of Allah, or like I'm just trying to sit here and just like say all these things. But even in U of H, like for the Kashmir issues, like I was
in the University of Houston.
University of Houston, sorry. University of Houston.
This is a global podcast, Fatima. We gotta clarify these things.
Yes,
We're not local anymore. Yeah.
Yes, at University of Houston, they even had like an informational session. And me and some of my friends that were not Black, that were not Kashmiri, or we were not even Black, Desi or anything at all. We went there and we went to go hear what they had to say. And we I didn't go to the protest because I was here in College Station at that time, but my mom and dad went to the protest, and they saw like all these chefs and everyone there. So it kind of, it felt kind of like a dagger to the heart that like, you do not care enough about people who do not look like you. And then another excuse that people were bringing was, well, they're kuffar anyways, right? They're going to hell anyways. They're going to hell anyways. It doesn't matter. And I'm just like, there are people in Palestine who are Christian. Palestine is known to have a lot of Christians living in Palestine, and we still support. Not everyone in Kashmir is Muslim, right? And these people are being killed. But I think the problem is Muslims tend to, when it comes to like Palestine.
But are all Black people non-Muslim?
No, no.
I mean, aren't you and I Muslim?
Exactly. We are Black and we are Muslim, and there's a huge percentage of people who live in. I come from Nigeria. Nigeria has a lot of Muslims. Northern Nigeria is known to have it's one of the countries that has the most, I forgot how they described it. It's like the most hafaz in like a square feet or whatever they describe. In this world, they have like the most amount of hafaz living in a particular area. And it just seemed like a lot of people kind of equate being like Palestinian to being Muslim. And then when they hear Black, it doesn't click to them that they're not mutually exclusive. Like you can be Black and you can be Muslim, right? So that was just a problem. And that was just something that hurt me. And I'm just like, it hurts a lot when people try to remove, like it's always a question when it's like you're fighting for Black lives. It's like, oh, but you should be Muslim first. You should be a Muslim first. Being a Muslim should be more important to you. But then when it's all these other issues, no one ever.
Do you actually hear these things?
Yes, actually I do. Sadly, I had The sad thing was it wasn't only like non-Black people. I had Black people also saying, you should be a Muslim first before your Black identity. Allah looks at your Islam for your Black identity. And obviously we're Muslims and everything we do is for Allah first. As Muslims, even when we're protesting, we're doing everything, we're supposed to have Allah in mind. We're doing this for the sake of Allah. But it shouldn't be something where it's like, oh, your Muslim identity and your Black identity are different. No, they're one and the same. Because you're Palestinian or you're Syrian or any other identity is not, people don't think of it as different.
It's not removed?
Yeah, it's not removed. That's the word. It's not removed. So people tend to remove the Black identity from being like Muslims, like, oh no, Black people, or no, Muslims. But they're not like different. They're the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you're enjoying the Faith While Black Conversations. It's a series sponsored by Deeper Roots, the History of Islam in Americas, taught by Dr. Abdullah 𝐁𝐥𝐿. You can find out more about the course at www.almaghrib.online. Now back to the program.
So this is something that is really important, I think, to really, number one, get educated on, and then number two is educate others. I remember there's a book by a professor. He used to be at the University of Michigan. I'm not sure if I don't think he's there anymore. Dr. Rudolph Ware. And he has a lot of books and a lot of research on Islam in West Africa in particular. Mm-hmm. And he mentioned a quote that I really liked from him was that, there is a higher percentage of Muslims in Senegal than in Syria, right? There are more Muslims in Nigeria than and comparing it to some countries, I think Iraq. Mm-hmm. There are more Muslims in Nigeria than Iraq. And so and the only Muslim majority continent in the world is Africa, right? And so he was basically making the argument of just a shift of perspective, and he was saying that we can no longer afford to think that Islam is peripheral to Africa, or that Africa is peripheral to Islam. I mean, we're talking about huge communities of Muslims on that continent, and of course, even in the United States as well. So you are discussing marriage as Black women. So it is that what the discussion is?
That's going to be our discussion Thursday, inshallah.
Okay. What have you guys been discussing so far?
Right now, it's just been marriage. No, it doesn't really have a lot to do with Black Lives Matter. We've just been discussing. We discussed polygyny. We discussed monogamy. Is monogamy like people try to make it seem like if you're against polygyny, I guess in your own marriage, then it's like, oh, you're against Islam and you're against like Allah because Allah made it allowed. And then we did life after divorce, and so that's all we've done so far.
MashaAllah. So, and then over the next couple of days, you'll be talking more about some of the concepts that are relevant now as far as Black Lives Matter and these types of projects and these types of movements. With regards to everything that is, the murder of George Floyd, how do you think, forget the general Muslim community, even the Nigerian community, how has it been reflected in the Nigerian community? How has it affected the Nigerian community?
With the Nigerian community, I'm not gonna lie, it's been very hard because Africans themselves, they do not see themselves as Black. They see themselves as, oh, I am Nigerian. I'm not like these African Americans. I'm not like these Black people. I'm educated.
So great. So when they get pulled over by the cops, do they not see themselves as, they still don't see themselves as Black?
We actually, it's funny because we actually had a town hall meeting, and then we had some discussion, and we saw that rhetoric that some people are like, well, maybe it's because these people are not cooperating with the police, right? They're not cooperating. And people are like, well, I've been stopped by the cops multiple times and I did not get killed. And that is because I know when the cops tell me to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to disobey what the cops say, right? And I'm like, that's not the point though. What we're talking about is people are getting killed for obeying the cops before they can even say anything, the cops already see them as a target just because of the color of their skin, right? And it was like a whole education for even my community. We even had people talking about, no, it's the way African Americans dress. Like, oh, they have dreadlocks, they're always sagging their pants, they're always doing like this as a respectable Nigerian. We don't do this. We Nigerians, we're very smart, we're this, we're that. I'm like, that's not the point. There's the case of the guy that was actually shot last year, the Ammar man really talked about. I forgot his name. His name was something Dean. He was a lawyer, right? He was a lawyer and he was dressed in a suit and everything. And he was trying to get in his car. I think he was the one that was trying to get in his car. There was a case, at least. I don't want to mention the name. He was trying to get in his car and somebody called the cops on him because they thought he was trying to break into the car, right? And when the cops came, they killed him. And then later on to find out that was his car he was trying to get into. He's a lawyer. He's respectable. He didn't have dreadlocks. He wasn't sagging his pants as the stereotype is, right? We had Breonna Taylor. She was sleeping at home and she was shot 8 times. What did she do wrong, right? And then it was just a lot of like education and like really educating the older Africans, because a lot of them really do not understand that this is something that also affects them. And it was more of like, you need to understand, like you said, when a cop stops you, the first thing he's seeing is your black skin. You haven't even opened your mouth yet. He doesn't even know anything about you. He doesn't know that you have an accent, right? He doesn't know that, oh, I have a Nigerian accent, so for sure, like, I'm different from all these other black people, right? He's seeing your skin and he's seeing you as, oh, a target, like, kill, right? So it was just a lot of education, and we're still in the process of educating, and inshallah, we are gonna get there, but it's a long process. And
what about, so that's the elder generation. What about the youth? What about your people?
So majority of the youth, actually, we do not see ourselves as different. We see ourselves as one and the same. We see ourselves, because most of us, we grew up here, we have friends that are African American. We classify ourselves as African American, right? Yes, maybe our parents were, our like generations were not slaves, but in America, in a way, we're kind of grouped together and we are still seen as the target. So we had a different, it's funny because the first town hall we had was in between us, and then we had to bring it up to like the older generation in order to like help educate them. So when it was for us, it was kind of like a way of like letting steam out and just talking about how we felt, our emotion. It was not a lot of education. It just was, okay, what's going on? How do you feel? And we had people say a lot of disturbing things. There was someone on that town hall, I remember she was talking about how she's really angry. And this she's one of the most quiet people that I've ever met. Very quiet, super gentle, whatever. And she was like, I'm very angry right now. And I feel like I am scared about what I can do because of this anger, right? Like, I am so angry and I feel like no one cares. And who knows, if I had a gun, I wouldn't go around and shoot up all these like white people, right? And it was kind of like, after we all had this discussion, and like, okay, then we had someone talk to us and remind us about Allah. Like, remember, like, Allah is first. Like, we have to make sure we put Allah first. And all this is happening. Allah knows everything that's happening. Allah's going to take us out of it, right? So it was more of like a venting session kind of thing. But then with the adults, it was more of an educating. So that's how it was for us.
Wow, so there was a lot of anger.
A lot of anger.
So that's the youth venting. You guys had a venting session and an educational session with the adults. What have been two things? You mentioned town halls. What are these regular things that you guys have, and these are all on Zoom or what?
It's on Zoom. I mean, we call it town halls. I don't know why Nigerians always say that, but it's just like a Zoom meeting, basically. Zoom meeting with everyone, and we're all discussing. With the adults, it was kind of like a program. We had speakers come talk. We had sheikhs talk about the issue. We had activists come talk about the issue. We had politicians come talk about the issues.
Wow,
so it came, I feel like it was like Nigerian politicians, right? Nigerian lawyers, Nigerians who are older and actually understand. So like it was easier for them to actually listen to it coming from someone who was their age, who actually understood this issue, obviously, than us talking about it. And then we did also have a session with the younger kids, and a lot of them were just kind of like confused. Like the teenagers, preteens, a lot of them, they didn't understand what's going on. They're like, so you're telling me I can still be killed and still like do everything the police said and still be killed? Like, aren't these the people that are supposed to be protecting us? Why are they killing us? Like a lot of questions. And it was just like, you have to try your best. Obviously, you have to obey authority, but yes, this still can happen, but make sure you're doing your du'as, you're protecting yourself, you're telling your parents what's happening to you, kind of thing. So it was just kind of like a reassurance for them also. That's how we did it in my community.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. And so on this topic of kind of just disconnect, as far as, and by the way, so whether it's West Africa or whether it's East Africa, it's still that same notion of kind of just disconnecting from the Black experience. Everybody's got something that they call themselves, right? And yeah. I'm sure a lot of that is post-colonialism as well.
Yes.
That being said, or an effective colonialism at least. That being said, what are the in Nigeria itself or within Nigerian society itself, is there a lot of inter-tribal prejudice that you guys experience? Is that the same as well?
Yes, that is very.
Because I know I did a session with Buna Muhammad already. We were talking about Ethiopia and Sudan, and it's very much alive there.
Yes, in Nigeria, it is this like exact same thing. In Nigeria itself, sadly, Nigeria was just like most countries, I don't know, in Africa, I'm guessing in East Africa, but in West Africa, it's very common, where it was kind of like all these people who had their own thing were kind of like grouped together. So like, obviously we know that they had the map, like the colonial, whatever, they had their maps and they had like their lines of how they were going to distribute everyone and make the states and make the countries. So even in Nigeria, there's three main like groups. There's the Yoruba, the Hausa, and the Igbos, right? And we're all different. We speak different languages. We eat different foods. It's not even like different dialects. This is complete different languages. We all see each other.
They might as well have been different countries.
They might as well have been different countries. Even we see, if anyone ever studies like history of Nigeria and how even how Britain got into Nigeria. I think it was first France that was trying to conquer the areas around, like conquer Nigeria as a whole. And it was like the North Nigeria, they had their own like caliphate system because they're Muslims. They're like 99.9% Muslim. They had their own caliphate system. And like France couldn't even enter Nigeria through them because they were very strong. They were united. But then France was able to come into what is known as Nigeria now through like the East, right? Because they were kind of divided. And where I'm from too, we're just kind of divided. We have our own little things. So in Nigeria till this day,
did France send them an email and say that they have a prince with 15,000 francs and that if they allow them entry, they will?
It was something of that sort because they were bribed and they were allowed to basically come in, basically. And in the North, they were very strong. They had their own like emirs. They had like the emir of Kano. They had like the emirs and everything. They had Uthman Danfodio and all these people who were very strong Muslims, and they were super against like being colonized and all that. But then later Britain came in through the East, and that till today it's still a problem that Nigeria faces, because there's always that when it's time for like elections to choose the president, it's always like, oh no, the East will be like, no, we want someone from the East to be the president, right? The North will be like, no, we want someone from the North to be the president. The West, where I'm from, no, we want a Westerner to be the president. And it's always, everyone has their own stereotypes of the other. Like, oh, Osa people, they're known to do this, they're just this, they're like that, and then like, you know.
So who's your neighbor to the West?
Who's our neighbors to the West country-wise?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Togo, if I'm not mistaken.
Because then if you guys are the West and you're a different people from the people in the North, then I would imagine that you are actually a similar people to the people of Togo then. Like
it's Benin. Benin is actually close to my tribe. They speak Yoruba. I'm Yoruba, right? West Nigeria is where Yorubas are, and they also like the same. It's basically the same country, honestly.
Yeah, so that's a game that the colonial powers did. I mean, that's why the map of Africa is like rulers, right? It's like straight lines. It's actually crazy when you see it, how they just kind of just drew up these. And they did that on purpose. They would divide and conquer. So divide people who are the same and gather all these people together who have nothing in common with each other. and let them fight civil wars for a good 100 years.
Yeah.
And they'll always come back to us for some sort of crutch or for some sort of stability or some sort of authority.
Facts. And that's
so,
the same. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying, yeah, that's true, because even all the way, like, there's Benin, there's Togo, and then there's Ghana, right? Even all the way to Ghana, we still have people who speak Yoruba, like my country, and that's like 2 countries over. So I can, like, they did that on purpose to obviously divide everyone. And
so when you navigate through Nigeria, I'm guessing then everybody just has to speak English.
Yes, our national language is English.
So leaving Nigeria and coming back to Houston, Texas. You lived here your whole life. Cool?
Yeah.
I had a friend who called me today from New York, never been to Houston, never been to the South. And he's asking me, he's like, what's the South like? Because up north, and I used to have this kind of, not stereotype, but a stereotype of Texas that, the South is kind of crazy, backwards, cowboy, backwards, ignorant, all of that type of stuff, the South. And that's the perspective that's prevalent in a lot of the Northeast, at least, of the South. Did you feel, growing up in Houston, Black woman, did you ever feel like, did you ever experience any sort of prejudice or racism, or did you ever feel unsafe?
Well, I'm not gonna lie. In Houston, I did experience racism and prejudice and stuff, but I never felt unsafe until I moved to College Station. Because here is not like Houston. Houston is very diverse. Like if you feel like racism or something from this group, you can always go to another. Like it's very diverse, even in the masajid that we have. Like if you don't like this masjid, there's like 50 other masjids you can go to. Everything is like close to each other. Like even my house was like 5 different masjids around. Like I can go to Hamza, I can go like anywhere, right? So even if I didn't like one masjid, I can always go to another masjid. But masjids aside, but here in College Station is a small town, right? College Station is a small town, an hour and a half outside of Houston. And I've never lived outside of my house. I've always lived at home, lived in Houston my whole life. But when I moved here, it was more of like, the racism is like from non-Muslims, not from Muslims, obviously, because we have a very small Muslim community here. They're very, mashallah, very accepting. But from the non-Muslims, you kind of see that there are people that actually support Trump. Like in my head when I was in Houston, I'm like, no one really supports him. It's just like, it's
really?
just
in Houston? Come on.
I didn't know of anyone. I would say I've never met someone who was actually a Trump supporter when I was living in Houston.
Wow. There's a lot.
There probably is, but I've never actually came like face to face with one. But here, everyone wears a MAGA hat. You'll see everyone, they have the MAGA hat. Every house has the Confederate flag, like on their truck, they'll have the American flag and they'll have the Confederate flag. Like it's very common. Like I've seen the Confederate flag in Houston too, but like everyone wearing like a MAGA hat, having the shirt, like people like just, you just went out to eat with your friends. Like I remember I went out to eat with my hijabi friend, we're at 𝐁𝐤𝐿's and we're just like eating chicken, right? And we just see like a whole group of people just walk in and they all have like their MAGA hat on and they're all just like chilling. And it's just like, as soon as they walk in, I don't feel safe anymore. Like, it's like, let's go. Like, we gotta go because they could do anything to hurt me. And you see people who are strapped all the time here. Like, everyone has their guns. Everyone has everything. So that makes you feel very unsafe.
It's freedom.
Yeah, it's
Second
freedom.
Amendment.
It's the Second Amendment. They have open carry in Texas. Like, everyone can have their gun everywhere they are. Like, I'm not sure if A&M is actually a concealed carry or they allow that at all, but like this is a college town. So like the school like 2 minutes from me, like you see it. People who just like right here, people have their guns with them all the time. People are strapped. People just like, there's people who walk around in their jeans, their plaid shirt, like country to the core. Like, and I'm not saying being country is bad at all, obviously, but a lot of them, they are the ones who make Texas red. So.
Okay. But no actually interpersonal experiences that you can that you actually experienced in College Station?
No, everyone to your face at least is nice. Like even I have classmates who I didn't know were Trump supporters until I actually added them on Facebook. And then you saw things they're posting like, oh yeah, that's how you really feel, right? But in person, they're super nice. They're like, oh, are you okay? Do you need anything? Like they make you try to feel okay. So at least to your face, they're not super mean about it.
That's what someone told me about the dichotomy of North and South. And I found it generally to be true. He told me when I moved to Houston, because I didn't understand this Southern hospitality thing. Like it's a real thing. Like people are really, hi, how are you? And they're waiting for you to respond. And I wasn't used to that. And so he told me, he said, in the North, people love you as a group and they hate you as an individual. But in the South, they love you as an individual and they hate you as a group.
Yes.
In the South, the idea of Muslims is like, no, we're not, you know, the idea of minorities, the idea of immigrants, the idea of all of this. But when they see Ahmed or when they see Fatima in front of them, they're all smiles. And I wouldn't even say that it's insincere. Like this is Southern hospitality. This is the way that they are. But in the North, it's defending minorities and it's protests and all of that, but they won't even talk to that minority who's in front of them. They won't talk to anybody. So it's just the way that it is. I noticed that dichotomy about the North and South, and I'm glad to hear that, alhamdulillah, you didn't have any negative experiences, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you.
Ameen. Alhamdulillah, everything's fine.
Alhamdulillah. So last thing, inshallah, before I let you go, what are you looking forward to seeing, and specifically the people around you, what do you see as necessary to be done, whether either in the Muslim community or whether in the broader community in this country of ours, inshallah ta'ala, with the whole I Can't Breathe movement? What would you like to see play out, inshallah ta'ala, in the next couple of weeks and in the next couple of months?
Well, for me personally, I would love to start with the Muslim community because I'm Muslim and I'm very involved with the Muslim community. But I would like to see, obviously starting first from the masajids and the communities that we have, there being more of a first education. Personally, I feel like education is a big deal, as a lot of people don't even understand anything about it's people think they understand Islam, but we really do not understand Islam at its core. Yes, what do
you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
The whole people, another thing, with the whole all lives, when people say Black Lives Matter, everyone says all lives matter, right? With Muslims, they'll be oh, when we talk about racism, people will be oh no, there's no racism in Islam. And it's yes, there's no racism in Islam, but Muslims themselves are racist, right? Muslims themselves are racist. We're not perfect, and we are not embodying Islam the way we're supposed to. So for education, I feel like it's not enough for Muslims to only know, for the Black Sahaba, the only Black Sahaba you know is Bilal. If that's the only Black Sahaba you know, then I think you need to do a little bit more of a history lesson. AYMN, who was with the Prophet, who was a mother figure to the Prophet. She was basically Black. She was Black. Yes, Bilal was Black. People, when they talk about Julaybi, they only say he was short, black, and ugly. That's it. That's to the extent it gets to. They never say anything positive about him. But he was a Sahaba, and I remember I've been to multiple lectures where they talk about Julaybi, and the only thing they always say is, oh, he was this short, ugly Black man that no one wanted. But it's if I'm sure if you went a little bit deeper, the Prophet himself did not think he was ugly. Yes, even if some companions described him as that way, that's not who he is. And then there's a lot of no one no one knows anyone except for Bilal. Bilal is the only Black person.
I'm gonna shift your mind a little bit, if that's okay, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I understand and I can appreciate Bilal ibn Rabah is Black. AYMN is Black. Usama ibn Zayd is described as being Black, very dark. The Prophet ﷺ loved him, kissed him, all of that. Judaybi, Muhammad ibn Maslama, lots of companions are described as being black. But do I need to know that about these companions? When I think of the companions, do I need to think of Aisha's skin tone and Bilal's skin tone and Salman al-Farisi's skin tone or Abu Bakr's skin tone? Because, and this is something interesting because I've noticed it spreading, and it's this notion of I need to connect with the black Sahaba. Me personally, I don't need to connect with the black Sahaba, right? Because yes, there were some companions who were black, but I don't need them to be black for me to create a connection with them. And the Muslim community, in moving in this direction, I worry because there aren't any Indian companions. So if I was Indian, who am I going to connect with? There are no Chinese companions. There's no Asian companions. There's no Latino companions, right?
True.
And so, alhamdulillah, there are some companions who are coming from Africa. And there are some, you know, we have one who came from Persia, and we have perhaps Suhaib al-Rumi was Roman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But the notion that I need to connect with a black companion, for the companions themselves, I think that, you know what, they're the Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However they are, wherever they are, they're all examples for us. So I say that, did that shift it a little bit for you, or?
No, I understand what you're saying.
My point?
No, I see your point, and I agree 1000%. Like, these are our Sahabas, and we're supposed to like when we think about them, they're supposed to be an example for us, right? It's not supposed to be like, oh, this person is black, this person is not. But sadly, people try to, I guess, maybe justify their racism and be like,
tokenize Bilal. They try to tokenize Bilal.
Yes, that's the word, like tokenize. But it's like, he's not the only one, right? And if that's the only one you know, then maybe you also need to do a little more history about all the Sahabas. You need to learn about all of them. Like, okay. I don't know. That's just, and I feel like I understand what you're saying. I'm not saying you're saying this, but some people can also say that and be like, and try to like, in a way, kind of make race not a factor, right? Make race not like, oh, I'm colorblind. And there's a problem with being colorblind, right? Like, that also comes with its own set of problems. You can't be colorblind. You need to treat everyone respectably just the way they are. Yes, Allah made us different. Allah made different colors and different tribes, so we can get to know each other and so we can learn about each other. But when people also try to remove race from the equation, to me personally, that can also be a problem. But I do agree, we need to be in the middle where it's like, you need to respect everyone as an individual, regardless of what their color is, regardless of where they come from. We need to be able to get to that point where we see someone and we're like, this person is Muslim, and it's not like, oh, like when they hear someone who recites Quran very well and they're black, they're like, oh, mashallah, are you Arab? Are you this? Like, oh, how did you learn? Like, it's like, no, like, I'm Muslim and I should learn how to read the Quran. Or no, if I speak Arabic, like, oh, I'm just an Arab wannabe. No, I learned Arabic so I can understand the Quran. I'm not trying to be Arab. I'm supposed to, this is my job. Like, as a Muslim, that's what I'm supposed to do, you know? So it just we as individuals need to become better and think in that way. But I'm also scared that a lot of people are not even, like, a lot of us, I'm not even saying people because I'm included, right? A lot of us, we are still, our mindset is not to that level yet, in a way. So we need to get to that mindset. And I 100% agree. We need to get to that point, but a lot of us aren't to that point yet. So we also need to learn a little bit more history and not tokenize Bilal and not just, ooh, like Bilal, that's enough activism for today, right? No, like, do more.
So what is enough activism? So back to that. So what do you, so you said with regards to the Muslim community, not tokenizing Bilal, moving beyond it, learning more about the companions, not simply dismissing the conversation by saying we're all colorblind, even though you see color every time that person happens to be colored, right? What would you like to see happen? And then actually, yeah, let's do that one, inshallah, and then I'll come up with our last question, inshallah.
Okay, so more would be standing, like, in our communities, making our communities more acceptable. Like, we need to start from within, obviously. We need to make sure in our communities, when you see not just Black people, when you see anybody, make sure everyone is comfortable in your community. There's a lot of converts, even in Houston, converts who come to the masjid and they're treated really badly. Some leave Islam, some they have like people make their own masajids, right? When Nigerians first came to Houston, we all used to go to ISGH masjids, right? Before Nigerian.
We calling out names now. Is that what we doing?
Oh, whoops, sorry. We can edit that part out.
Sorry, we'll just bleep it out. Don't worry. We're not gonna
like we used to go to all.
Yeah.
We used to go to all masajids, right? Everyone used to go to every single masajid. We didn't see there to be a problem until we started facing these problems of our own, and then we decided to make our own masajids. And then now there's like every tribe has their own masajid, and it shouldn't be like that. I mean, I understand that everyone has their own issues as a community that they need to work on, but I feel like if we were more unified and we were more as one, we wouldn't feel the need to have our own masjids in order to deal with these problems. We would come as a community together and deal with these problems. But it's just because people don't feel comfortable enough in the communities that they are. That's why they feel like they have to go make their own communities. And I just not like the most important.
Doesn't language have to do with it though? So you mentioned like these three major groups in Nigeria. So I'm assuming each one of them probably has their own masjid.
In Nigeria, yes, but they all speak English. That's the thing. Like the ones that come here, at least, like, okay, in Nigeria, maybe everyone has their own masjid. And that's also because of geographic location. We can't really have one masjid where everyone goes to because.
Yeah, I'm with you. Sorry.
We can't really have one masjid everyone goes to because we're all spread out. Nigeria is huge. Like we're all spread out. The north is like super far, right? But even when people from the east or the west, they go to the north, they don't, I mean, from what I know, my limited knowledge, I've never really gone, so I don't really know, but I'm sure that they still have that, like, they still go to the same masjids. It's not like, oh, if I'm living in the north, but I'm from the west, I have my own western masjid that we go to that only whatever. So I just feel like as a community, we need to be more accepting. And I'm not even talking about just other, like, even in my community, I told my community, as our own community, we need to be more accepting of others. Do other people who are there, there's minorities in my masjid that are not Nigerian. They're from Senegal and they're from all these other countries. And they feel like second-class citizens in our masjids because our masjids don't think of them as their people. Our masjids will never let them go on the board because they feel like they're not the same, right? So even our own masjids, we need to be more accepting of these people. And it's also like an issue that everyone needs to, all masjids. It's not just like a specific type of masjids, all masjids.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you're talking about trying to fix the country when we're trying to fix our own neighborhoods first.
Yeah.
It's very, very important. I mean, we're so close. And I'm not going to say yet so far away because inshallah we will get there and we'll do better, inshallah. Last thing, and Jazakallah khair, really appreciate your time. I know you're busy trying to get multiple degrees all at the same time and saving the world and all that type of stuff. It's summertime, but you're still in College Station and still working. Last thing, and this is the funny thing because I'm about to ask you, what projects are you working on? What you got going on? And you actually have other things happening. So beyond the tell us about the podcast, where people can find it, and what other projects you've got going on.
Well, I am starting the next series, which is going to be like a Black Lives Matter series. It's actually going to be the unheard voices of Black people. I think that's what I'm trying to name it, something like that. But it's going to be, we're going to be tackling issues, and it's going to kind of, I'm going to try to be like interviewing people, and we're going to be talking about issues that Black people have experienced, and they're going to be talking from experience. Obviously, we're not going to try to mention any names or anything of like messages or anything. We're going to keep it as anonymous as possible, but we're going to be talking so just people can understand, a way of connecting to people who feel like maybe this is not their struggle, or maybe they just can't really understand what like Black people are going through, because Black people have been through a lot. Personally, I've been through a lot too. Like I didn't talk about like, oh, my experience in like Houston and like all that too from a very young age. Like, so we're going to talk about kind of not just racism, but just like issues that Black people go through, and try to help, especially for me, my like people that I'm trying to obviously cater to is Muslims, because like I'm Muslim. So I feel like a lot of Muslims who are not Black need to hear some of these things, and that might actually
give us one of these experiences. What are these experiences? You grew up in Houston, surrounded by Nigerians, going to a Nigerian masjid. What experiences are you having? You're from the West Side. West Side runs the masjid.
I didn't only go to Nigerian masjid. I went to all, when we were younger, we went to all masjids. We went to all masjids that we could go to. And the funny thing was, most of my life, we never lived close to our Nigerian masjid. We always lived further away. So we'd have to go to masjids that were around us. And then for maybe Saturday school or something, we would go to the Nigerian masjid. Before, like, after, we had to, from when I was younger, we had to go to a madrasa from like after school, right after school you go straight to your Arabic school. So we went 5 days a week, and that was during the week, and that was not the Nigerian masjid. And when I was younger, the Nigerian masjid actually did not have facilities for this, because most of our older, they didn't really have that, like, they felt at least that they didn't have that Islamic knowledge that only an Arab can
which is funny because in Houston, some of the strongest huffaz as far as young people are the Nigerians. Like, do you remember Elm Fest a couple of years ago? Who was who was the sister who was on that team against the Shuyukh?
It was me, Sakina, Mutmainna, and then Besant and Sara Radwan. I think it was 5 of us.
It's 5 sisters, but there was one sister on that group who was just killing it. Who was
Sakina. That's Sakina.
Sakina, huh? Sakina is embarrassing the shuyukh, because it was a category. I think it was Quran, right? And I remember one of the questions was like, name all of the surah that start with Alhamdulillah. And Sheikh Walid is kind of just trying to count, and we saw trying to count, and I'm just like, I'm not even doing this. I back out. And Sakina's just like, Al-Fatiha, Fatir, Al-Kahf, and I don't remember what the other 2 were, but it was just like, it was a monster.
Mashallah. But I think another thing is, like, Nigerians, sometimes they kind of, I would say, psych themselves out, and they think, oh, like, the only people that really know this are like, oh, our Arab brothers and sisters. They're the ones who, like, oh, the Quran was sent to them, so they know this, right? So a lot of people. So now I'm thinking, what are the other 2 surahs? So I got an An'am now popped up in my mind, and now I got to figure out what the 5th surah is. But go ahead. So we said Fatir. I think it's Sabah.
Okay.
I think so. I don't want to say it wrong, but
now you got me.
Maybe it's Sabah. I'm not sure. Let me see. Let me check for you. Yes, it's Sabah. Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah.
Yes. So, yeah, it is Sabah. Okay.
Okay, good.
So, like, it's just kind of, yes, they probably didn't know much, and they felt like they didn't know much, but it was, when I was younger, we used to go to all masajids. My parents never limited us to just going to the Nigerian masjid because of distance, but also because they felt like any masjid is any masjid. Like, we were also, like, I wasn't born here. I came here when I was around 4 years old, right? With my parents, we migrated here. So my parents also, like, we all didn't know anything. Like, we obviously did not believe anyone could treat us differently because of the color of our skin. We're just like, no, everyone's Muslim. MashaAllah, this is going to be like a perfect utopia. Like, this is the land, like, the Prophet lived this way, and obviously nothing. But going to some of these classes, like, we saw, like, firsthand that a lot of, I mean, at that point, it was like, we didn't really realize that it was a lot of, like, maybe racism or things like that. It was when we grew older that we talked about these things. Like, me and my friends the other day were, like, talking. We're like, wow, like, we were literally, multiple times we've been told, like, when we bring food, like, it's like, oh, this food is haram. And it's like it's literally African food. It's like, no, this food is haram. I'm going to give you some biryani instead, or we're going to give you this instead. Because that food is haram. And I'm like,
haram? Like,
haram. We had to throw it in the trash. like things like that. And it's like, it's not because maybe they didn't mean to do that, but it's probably because they didn't understand, because it's African food, right? So there's some like traditional food that my parents would pack for me, and they probably didn't know what it was, so they just assumed it was haram. It's like, no, come eat this instead. Or like things like, what else? I don't know. It's a lot of like, oh, we were kind of treated differently in a sense. It could not, I mean, that could also not be the teacher's fault or whatever. The students would kind of like, maybe because they were all from the same area, so they all kind of stayed with each other, and then we were all left like during break time. We didn't have anybody to talk to. We just like sit around. I mean, that's how kids are though, so we can't really like blame anyone. That's children bully each other, and then being called like things like African booty scratcher. Like because I still have an accent, right? I'm like 4 years old, but I'm predominantly speaking my language at home. Like in my house, we don't speak any English at home. As soon as you walk through those doors, English is out the window. So like things like my English being very broken, other people's English probably not being, so things like that. And just
Alhamdulillah. So last we talked about the project, right? Podcast, where can they find it though? That's the question.
It's on Instagram only. I go on Instagram lives. Usually it's Monday, Wednesday, Sunday. Sometimes it just really depends on my work schedule and school and all that. But I always
it's not even recorded.
It is recorded. I always save it and post it on my thing. But it's easier if you come in to join the conversation, because we always have questions, and we always ask the guest speaker to answer those questions. And it's just, sometimes I don't save all of them because it gets too long. Sometimes we're going live like 3 hours, and it's like, okay, I'm only gonna save the first one because that person was very like to the point, the topic and everything, and then the others are just like questions of questions. So that's how I do it. It's on Instagram.
Okay, alhamdulillah, excellent. And your Instagram is, we're gonna have it pop up on the screen, but in case you want to shout it out,
it's gonna be FAZO 971.
Excellent. 971, of course, is the area code of Nigeria, just representing. All right, Jazakallah khair, Fatima. I really appreciate your time.
No, I really appreciate you. Jazakallah khair.
Oh, yeah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam. My kisses to Sarah and the baby.
We'll do, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. All right.